billion from the Pentagon's military construction budget. One administration official tells me that $3.6 billion is meant to backfill the $3.6 billion that was in the national emergency declaration. And all the money is said to be enough to finish building all of the 722 miles of border wall President Trump wants.
The request could lead to another government shutdown. The president's budget proposal aims to balance the budget in 15 years. Minutes into the flight, another Boeing 737 MAX 8 crashes, killing all 157 passengers, including 8 Americans. Fox's Trey Yingst.
Officials say that more than 35 different nationalities were represented among those killed. The plane lost contact with air traffic control around 8:44 a.m. local time, just 6 minutes after takeoff. The flight was headed to Nairobi, Kenya.
Air traffic control indicating the pilot mentioned a problem and was cleared to return. Moments later, contact with the control tower was lost. Ethiopian and Chinese officials have grounded the aircraft. More trouble for R&B star R. Kelly.
A couple claims to have discovered VHS footage showing the singer engaged in sex acts with underage girls.
It is a crime to knowingly possess child pornography.
Attorney Gloria Allred describing the footage and representing the couple who claim to have found it in an old VHS collection.
Degrading, sexually predatory misconduct.
Her clients claim they don't know where the tape came from.
His attorney denies it's Kelly on the tape. The singer already faces 10 counts of sexual abuse involving 4 women. This is Fox News.
Friendly burgers at Chili's. Indulge in a selection of our famous burgers with a black bean patty. Black bean patties combine beans with onions, parsley, bell peppers, and cilantro. Served with dill pickles and fries. More Latin entrees include the spicy shrimp tacos, Cajun pasta with shrimp, or grilled ancho salmon. Best of all, each entree is just $15 and comes with a refreshing Coca-Cola, iced tea, or Heineken on draft. Our fresh house salad with an entree for just $15. Chili's 3 for Meal-Let menu. Available for a limited time. Chili's. More life happens here.
A push to lower the voting age to 16 has failed. Fox's Jackie Heinrich explains.
Supporters said that lowering the voting age would create lifelong voters and increase the voter turnout, but some doctors said it's not a good idea because of brain development. Massachusetts Representative Ayanna Pressley made that proposal as part of a Democratic-backed bill to expand voting rights. The argument was more youth should have a say in who represents them. Pressley said young people are already making their opinions heard on key issues, as we saw with gun control after the Parkland, Florida high school shooting.
Only one Republican voted for the proposal. Nearly half of Democrats voted against it. 4 U.S. cities allow 16-year-olds to vote in local elections. 25 states allow 17-year-olds to vote in primaries if they'll be 18 on Election Day. Opponents claim Democrats want to lower the voting age because it would give them the majority. Weekend warriors on the campaign trail for 2020.
Candidates hoping to square off with President Trump in 2020 have been fanning out across the country. A Democratic favorite, Vermont Independent Senator Bernie Sanders, is stumping in New Hampshire, saying how his presidency would be different.
The underlying principles of our government will not be greed, will not be hatred, and lies.
Many miles away in Texas, other Democrats have been appearing at the annual South by Southwest conference to tout their candidacies, including Julian Castro and Senators Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Kyle Busch wins the 2019 Ticket Guardian 500.
For myself and the career that I've had, I've been fortunate to be with a lot of great people and a lot of great sponsors, and that keeps me going each and every weekend, and to work with my guys and to take them to victory lane is what it's all about.
Audio Fox Sports. This marks Busch's 199th career victory in all 3 major series. The top 5 for the race include Martin Truex Jr., Ryan Blaney, Eric Almirola, and Denny Hamlin. I'm Ann Carrick, and this is Fox News.
Experience the Take Care difference. Take Care members can count on accessing a high-quality, credentialed network of on-island providers, including the convenient one-stop FHP Health Center and urgent care, access to an extensive off-island network of providers, and the island's largest offering of free fitness classes and health education programs. You can count on Take Care to deliver comprehensive, accredited insurance coverage and quality health care when and where you need it. Take Care. Our island, your health plan. Learn more at takecareasia.com.
Help celebrate Earth Month with 93.3 The Point and the return of the Upcycle Mascot Showdown. Stay tuned for details on the upcoming live event and how you can support your favorite school. The Upcycle Mascot Showdown, brought to you by Lolita Kamet from Remax Diamond Realty, the Agana Shopping Center, Sylvan Learning Center, PBS Guam, and 93.3 The Point.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times, and I will probably continue to keep on saying it for quite some time, for more than one reason that I articulate here from time to time. Perhaps the most important of which is that this program, Tall Tales, is constitutionally oriented. That is that the philosophy of this program is that the United States Constitution is perhaps, as far as documents go, the one that has gone as far as any other to secure the to secure individual freedom and liberty for the people who live within its confines. So that's one of the reasons that we start out with the United States Constitution every day. The second reason is, of course, that the real Joe Cruz, who faithfully maintains the control room here, grooves on the Second Amendment. Right, real Joe Cruz?
I love the right to bear arms, sir.
All right, so there you go. Very well put, real Joe Cruz. So there you have it. So after that, oftentimes I have an anecdote or two dealing with the Second Amendment. I don't today. So we'll go from the Second Amendment straight to that part of the agenda, which gives the real Joe Cruz the opportunity to be really quick on the draw when it comes to playing the theme song for
Demi Cutney.
There you go. Boy, talk about quick on the draw. That's the real Joe Cruz. Thank you, real Joe Cruz. So for the uninitiated, during our Demi Cutney portion of the program, which is a bilingual play on words. I probably should have put the word corny in there somewhere, too. A corny bilingual play on words, Press the Meat, becomes Meet the Press, and it's our opportunity to be hypercritical of the editorials of the two daily newspapers. I go through them at some length with a fine-tooth comb, an electron microscope. We parse the editorials. We do autopsies on the editorials, etc. And finally, after that in-depth analysis, I decide which of the two is the better. And that editorial will receive the coveted Blue Star, which will be known to all and sundry in our international radio listening audience. And as I've mentioned from time to time, if you happen to be in Tamuning, close to the offices of the Post, or in Agana, close to the DNA building, depending on which of those two organizations won the coveted Blue Star for that day, you could actually hear the champagne corks popping as I announced that that particular news organ has won the coveted blue star for the day. It's not the Pulitzer Prize, but for our purposes, it's pretty darn close. So with no further ado, I will launch into the Daily News editorial. And this one's a little cryptic. It certainly reads like a Gannett editorial, or perhaps a WAPO editorial, even worse, but they don't attribute it to that, leading us to believe that it's a locally produced product. In either case, the Blue Star Award will be based on what is on the paper, not where it came from. So here's the point that they're trying to make, that asking a question on the U.S. Census as to the citizenship of those who are subject to the census taker's question is aims to maintain Republican power. Now, by way of background, we know that every 10 years, on the even-numbered years, a census is taken, and that means that somebody probably is going to come and knock on your door, show you a credential, introduce, I would ordinarily say himself or maybe herself, but I know I shouldn't do that, right? What should I say, Real Joe Cruz? Introduce
themselves?
Themselves, yes. Even if it's only one person, right?
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah, it's hard, but I'll catch it. Give me time, and I'll catch on so that I'm able to apply this linguistic enforced pretending every time I open my yap. Anyhow, the census taker will ask a battery of questions, and this year the administration wants to ask, what country are you a citizen of? Are you a citizen of the United States? And here is the editorial take on that by the Daily News. Republican strength over the past decade has relied in part on the unique circumstances of 2010, when an electoral romp at the state level afforded the GOP the power to grotesquely gerrymander congressional districts to its advantage. With a census scheduled for next year and redistricting the following year, the Republican Party is looking at a distinctly different landscape. Now, let me go back again and supply some background here. I guess we all know what grotesque means. The paper that I'm looking on does not have a picture of Di-Fi or Bernie Sanders, but I think you've seen enough of their pictures, so I don't have to explain too much what the word grotesque means. So the GOP in 2010 grotesquely gerrymandered congressional districts. Now, the word gerrymander actually should be pronounced gerrymander, because it comes from the name of a person who was in the United States Congress at the very beginning, someone who actually signed, I don't remember if it was a Constitution or a Declaration of Independence, a gentleman named Elbridge Gerry. And he was a Massachusetts official and drew up a districting map so that if you looked at it at the right angle, it looked like one of the districts on the map looked like a salamander. So the way this works is, and I'll get into this a little more in depth, each state has representation in Congress in accordance with the number of congressmen it sends to the House of Representatives, and that number is determined by the population of the state. Every state has at least one congressman. I think California has 45. Actually, the state with only one probably got the better end of that deal. But so congressmen then don't run at large within a state. They are elected from districts, and districts are formed in accordance with the law of the state. So these gerrymandered districts were set up in such a way that they favored Mr. Gary's political party, and newspaper cartoonists of the time had a ball with that map because they said, this district here looks like a salamander. And that's the origin of the term gerrymander. So that when state districts are drawn up, they're drawn up to favor one party over the other. You come up sometimes with some odd shapes, just as Elbridge Gerry was able to do over 200 years ago. So the way that the gerrymandering works is this. You could either pack a district or it's either packing or spreading. So let's say that you have 40% of the people in the state are Democrat and 60% are Republican. And let's say that the state is entitled to 6 districts. Well, you'd try to, if you could, you'd put all of the Democrats in one of those districts and spread the Republicans out over the other 5. That would be a really good job of gerrymandering. The opposite is to take that 40% and spread them out so thinly that they would not be able to elect a congressman in any one of the districts. This is what gerrymandering means. So the GOP in 2010, according to the Daily News, engaged in grotesquely gerrymandering congressional districts to its advantage. Well, I can't imagine anybody who can gerrymandering to its disadvantage. So that kind of is a given. The next paragraph, several states badly gerrymandered by Republicans after the 2010 census now have Democratic governors with veto powers. What's more, state ballot initiatives limiting gerrymandering have been passing whenever they have been on the ballot. And the Supreme Court could act against gerrymandering as well. Now, unpacking this paragraph, some states, instead of letting the state legislature draw the map of congressional districts, some states have developed various kinds of commissions to in a theoretically nonpartisan manner, draw the district boundaries. As far as the U.S. Supreme Court getting involved in gerrymandering, not very likely. The Supreme Court will get involved in districting by the states if there is a racial discrimination dimension. But so far, the U.S. Supreme Court has run away as fast as it could from any case that looks like there would be an expectation that it would address political party gerrymandering in any one of the states. So probably the Supreme Court is not going to have much to do with this. So that's the foundation here that we're talking about here with state representation and gerrymandering. The Trump administration has been looking for ways to offset the party's declining power to gerrymander. It thinks it has found one in a plan to mess up the census so much that it would undercount people in big cities and other Democrat-leaning areas, giving them less representation. The idea is to intimidate immigrants by asking on the census whether each person in a household is a U.S. citizen. Now, once again, some definition is required here. The left plays really fast and loose with immigrant, the word immigrant. According to the left, these poor unfortunate souls that are trying to climb the fence at Tijuana are immigrants, and the Border Patrol is really being mean to immigrants. Not what the word immigrant means. An immigrant is someone who travels to a country to become a permanent resident in that country in accordance with the laws of that country. So there can't be an illegal immigrant. That would be a contradiction in terms. There can't be an undocumented alien or the popular phraseology, illegal alien. So the editorial now wants to say that the idea is to intimidate immigrants by asking on the census whether each person in a household is a U.S. citizen. Well, for immigrants, that is it's not going to be very intimidating, because an immigrant, if he's not a citizen, would by definition be a lawful permanent resident and would have no problem at all saying, I am not a citizen, I am a lawful permanent resident, I am a citizen of Lower Slobovia or wherever. Fortunately, 2 federal judges have seen Trump's plan for what it is, an appalling power grab designed to maintain Republicans in office and withhold funds from places Trump doesn't like. Nothing like loading up the vocabulary here, grotesquely, appalling, etc. But the Trump administration is pressing on. Last month, it succeeded in persuading the Supreme Court to bypass the normal appeal process and take the matter up immediately. The truth, now here comes the truth, and we know it's the truth because the editorial is telling us. The truth is the Census Bureau does ask about citizenship in something known as the American Community Survey. It's done every year, not once a decade. The actual census is short. It asks name, age, gender, and race of each person living in a household. Its purpose is to get an accurate head count of all people living in America, regardless of their legal status. Well, if you're asking, and if you're asking about race, and if you're asking about marital status and gender, now I wonder how that one is phrased on the census. What is your sex? Okay, thank you very much. What is your gender? Thank you very much. What will your gender be tomorrow? Thank you very much. What was your gender last week? Thank you. I can see 15 different questions there on the matter of gender. But it would seem that how many citizens we have living in the United States is a pretty relevant figure. This count is used to determine both political representation and the amount of federal and state money a community receives. Okay, so herein lies the real story, as Paul Harvey would say when I finish with this. California, as you well know, has an open arms policy for illegal immigrants. Come to California. California is a sanctuary state. Even if you wind up in the pokey, we're not going to tell ICE that you're in the pokey and you committed a deportable offense and you're about to be released. We're going to do everything we can to make illegal aliens comfortable in California. And given what I just mentioned, I think you understand why. But to make it really clear, I'm going to turn to the United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 2. The House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states, chosen by the people of the several states, not by the citizens, not by the legal residents, but by the people of the several states. So the more people you have in a state, the more representation you have in Congress. So for California, there's a tremendous upside in having as many illegal aliens within your state as you can, because you're going to have more congressmen and you're going to get a bigger helping of the federal money. Now, the editorial actually lays that out for us by saying this count is used, meaning the census, to determine both political representation and the amount of federal and state money a community receives. So the more aliens you have, the more money you get, and potentially the more representatives in Congress. And that would not change even if we knew how many citizens were living in a state, because the Constitution says people. It doesn't say citizens. Maybe this was an oversight. But I've mentioned this before. The link between citizenship and voting has never been a strong one. 1924 was the first time we had a presidential election in the United States in which no non-citizen voted. Stated another way, up until 1920, non-citizens voted in presidential elections in the United States. It was not required that a person be a citizen to vote. And I've been through this one before, too. There is no constitutional right to vote. Scan the Constitution and you won't find an individual right to vote. Now, over there, Mr. Smart Money is saying, oh, yeah, what about 13th, 14th Amendments, 15th Amendment? Well, those amendments are restrictions, and they say that if there is a vote, a state can't restrict the access to that vote because of previous condition of servitude, race, age under over 18, or sex. But it does not confer a right to vote. And here's another interesting fact that you can amaze your friends with. In 1876, in the state of Colorado, nobody voted for president because Colorado had 3 electors in 1876, 3 electors in the Electoral College, and the state legislature decided how those electors would vote. That was the infamous Hayes-Tilden controversy, you might remember. So, I hope for the sake of the Daily News that they did get this from the WAPO, because if this is where their head is really at, it's even worse than I thought it was. The next thing I expect to see will be that when I sit down and read the hard copy of the paper, I will think that I'm dyslexic, because instead of being able to read the lines from left until right, it will appear that I have to read from right until left, because the tilt here is so hard to the left, both with the grotesque use of the language and the point that is being made, and then, of course, the obligatory anti-Trumpism, which any good lefty must start out any of his remarks with a good Trumpism. And this editorial is no exception. The Trump administration has been looking for ways to offset the party's declining power to gerrymander. It's just a cheap shot. According to a speech that the president made, or according to the Pentagon Papers, or according to the real strong dislike that the writers of this editorial have for Trump, the Trump administration has been looking for ways to do a little bit better job of the gerrymandering. So that's the Daily News editorial, for whatever it's worth. Okay, and next we have the Post. Thank you to good Samaritans who help avert injury and cleanup. Now, Samaritans are people from, were people from what we now know as the West Bank, and what is nominally part of, at least administered by Israel. And it's the kind of things that our erstwhile Muslim congressmen are quite interested in. That would be Representative Tlaib and Representative Omar, because the Samaritans are a variety of what we would refer to as Hebrew people. And I think we all remember the parable of the Good Samaritan. A man was on the roadside seriously injured, and 2 high-ranking people came by, a priest and somebody else. And because the man that was hurt, they didn't help the man who was hurt. But then a Samaritan came along who should have been an anathema to the person who was hurt. They should not have been on each other's Christmas cards list. But the Samaritan, out of the spirit of brotherly love, helped the injured person. So we've picked that up, and it's become a part of the American speech. He is a good Samaritan. He'll help out people even when they're opposed to him or even when there's nothing in it for him. And we even have... Yeah, already, huh? Okay, well, I'm going to be a good Samaritan here. Take a break for a few minutes.
In 1972, Jesus S. Leon Guerrero pictured a brighter future for our island and its people. With the trust and support of the community, he founded Bank of Guam. In celebration of our 47th anniversary, we're offering a Founders Day loan for up to $50,000, as low as 4.70 annual percentage rate, up to 72 months. Visit any branch or bankofguam.com for more information. Subject to bank's lending criteria, terms and conditions apply. Offer valid until March 29, 2019. Bank of Guam, member FDIC.
Do you know someone who has difficulty following conversation in noisy places or turns up the TV a little too loud? These may be signs of a hearing loss. Ross Hearing Aids specializes in hearing evaluations, custom-fit hearing aids using the latest in wireless digital technology, and custom-fit hearing protectors. Call Ross Hearing Aids today to schedule a complimentary hearing consultation. 637-HEAR, 637-HEAR. Ross Hearing Aids, located across Shirley's in Harmon. Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So the term Good Samaritan, we even have law in the books here in Guam that protects, it's called a Good Samaritan law. And I think probably most of the states have similar legislation that one who is a Good Samaritan and helps someone who's in need of some sort of something like medical care will not be liable if what that person does goes south unless the Samaritan were grossly negligent. So there's a protection for a Good Samaritan who comes along and helps and perhaps doesn't do things exactly right. So that's what we mean by a Good Samaritan. Now, this editorial... I'm going to ding the Post on their use of the word Good Samaritan here, and I think you'll agree with me. Thank you to Good Samaritans who help avert injury and clean up. There are many ways private citizens have done their part when they see something in public that they know is wrong. Well, that's true, but what has that got to do with being a Good Samaritan? This weekend, a video went viral showing a man in a white tuxedo trying to continue driving late Saturday night in the heart of the Tumum tourist area after his car had crashed. You saw that, didn't you, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir, I did.
Yeah. Kind of gives a whole new meaning to the word bus stop. So for those of you who haven't seen the video, a gentleman was trying to pull out of, I think, the Acanta Mall, and the front end of his car was positioned out into the roadway. I see that all the time, and it's annoying at best that some drivers think they're gaining some advantage by using up part of the roadway in such a manner that's potentially dangerous. So this driver did that, and a great big bus came along and took off the bumper of that car. Like it was out a little too far, and the bus just took his bumper off. Well, apparently the driver of the car was in something of a hurry because he didn't want to stop and deal with his car in the condition that it was in, with the bumper sticking out about 6 feet in front of the car and scratching the pavement. So he kept going a little bit until the bus stopped, and then the guy finally stopped. So I guess if you want a bus to stop and pick you up, what you do is get somebody who's driving a car to stick the nose of his car out into the roadway there, right? So that's what happened. Now, here's the Daily News, the Post's write-up of this. When the man's car protruded on the road after he tried driving again, a tour bus seemed to have clipped part of the already dangling front bumper. The tour bus stopped, but the damaged car inched forward until it couldn't move anymore, as it was right in front of the bus that had stopped. Well, not really. It was right behind the bus that had stopped. If it had been right in front of the bus that had stopped, probably would have kept going. Bystanders saw a chance to persuade the driver from continuing to drive. Eventually, the man in the tuxedo got out of his car. When the driver struggled out of his car, one of the bystanders held the driver's arm in an apparent effort to steady him as he walked out of the road and onto the roadside. Without these Samaritans, the outcome of this incident could have been different. Yeah, like the driver could have fallen on his face. That would have been different. Other people could have been hurt. The driver might have fallen on top of someone else. We don't know the Samaritan's names in this incident, but we thank them for taking action. So it was the Samaritan-like deed telling the guy, hey, dummy, you've already really screwed things up. Get out of that car and don't even think about driving anymore. Or was a Samaritan-like act when the guy finally got out of the car and they grabbed his arm and helped him to walk so he wouldn't fall on his face? If either one of these things constitutes being a good Samaritan, it's a pretty low standard. In another incident, Good Samaritans recently saw and video recorded the illegal dumping of trash in the water by the edge. All right. This is a real good sentence. In another incident, Good Samaritans recently saw and video recorded the illegal dumping of trash in the water by the edge of shore in East Agania Bay. Could have been the water's edge. It could have been the shore of East Agania Bay. But in this case, it was in the water by the edge of shore. Hard to get a blue star with this kind of writing, folks. Recently, Kobe Guzman, a captain of Joe's Jet Ski in Tamuning. Once again, for clarity purposes, this is Joe's Jet Ski in Tamuning. This is not the real Joe Cruz. Guzman noticed a woman throwing large pieces of cardboard into the ocean on Wednesday. When he knew he knew he had to act. His manager, J.R. Rabanal, confronted the woman while Guzman caught it all on video. LMS owner Bob Salas said his employees also witnessed the illegal dumping and hauled away the debris once it was returned to shore. He said his company picks up trash on the beach on a daily basis under a contract with the Guam Visitors Bureau. There are many ways private citizens have done their part when they see something in public that they know is wrong. Thank you, Good Samaritans, for helping to avert injury and cleaning up after a trash thrower in East Agania Bay. Well, it was the guy who did the video and turned it into a viral piece. Was he a Good Samaritan? Or was he a rat? Was he a Good Samaritan, or did he have a good, solid case of the gotchas and said to himself, hey, gotcha, lady, I'm going to video this and I'm going to put this online? Now, that's a good thing to do, and perhaps the lady learned a lesson, but we do take pains to encourage a certain amount of precision in the use of language here on Tall Tales. Witness the intelligence tests that the real Joe Cruz is able to master right after the halftime show. And by the way, stay tuned today. So if you're going to use the word Good Samaritan, please use it properly. Now, I don't think that Colby Guzman or J.R. Rubano are what I would call good Samaritans. If anything, what they did was kind of hurt the lady. Now, anybody who throws junk into the ocean, does not deserve the protection of tall tales. That's for darn sure. Then when we get to Bob Solis and his company retrieved the cardboard after it washed ashore, you can't credit him with being a good Samaritan because he's under a contract with the Guam Visitors Bureau. So there probably are a lot of good Samaritans out there in our community. I think probably the left would not allow it, but if we were to include a question on the census that's coming up, are you a good Samaritan? Like I said, the left would never permit it because they'd see it some kind of a dastardly trick on the part of the Trump administration. But I would hypothesize that we have, per capita wise, a large number of Good Samaritans in our community. But let's not devalue the term Good Samaritan by using it the way the Daily News did here. So I got to make a judgment here. I'm not going to be a Good Samaritan today. I'm going to be very judgmental, and I'm going to be hard. Daily News, for the way you use the language or misuse the language, you are not going to get the coveted blue star. And I'm sorry, Post. And for the Daily News, because you're so hard left and sound so much like the WAPO, you are not going to get the gold star. So I'm going to call it a scoreless tie. There are no winners. And it's Monday, so you got 4 more chances here, Daily News and Post. You gotta try a little bit harder than you did today, because this was a dual lackluster performance. So must be just about break time, isn't it, Real Joe Cruz?
No, sir. We got about 8 more minutes till break.
8 more minutes, huh? Okay. I think I got somebody on the line here. Oh, it's Simon Atgidun. Okay.
I meant to ask you earlier, what is Adgudun? Cotton?
Cotton.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Simon.
Clever, sir.
Yeah. Well, he's a pretty clever guy. Yeah. Mo Atgidun. Good afternoon, Mo.
I'm happy you explained what Atgidun meant, because I've had people ask me, and I was using that name as an artist when I first started painting again 25 years ago, and then I quit because no one knew what that meant. But thank you for that. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the Good Samaritan thing. I wasn't going to call in, but I have, if you want a good story, here's a good one. I collapsed on the road, Achotasi, which has no sidewalks. And are you still listening to me?
I'm listening, Mo.
Okay. I apparently I found out later I had some blood clots in my lungs, and they were pretty big, and when they got close together, they cut off my wind. So I collapsed. I didn't faint, but I could hardly move, and cars were going by me pretty fast, some with their windows down, looking at me, and I couldn't talk. What I really wanted to do is to get my phone out of my pocket so I could call my wife to come pick me up. And finally, a jogger came by, and I think he would have tripped over me had he not stopped, but he stopped. Now that's the Good Samaritan, because he asked me, "Can I help you?" Help me get the phone out of my pocket. So I was able to get the phone out and get down to the hospital. By the way, they took me to GMH, and GMH said, no, we can't help you. You're in bad shape. You better go to GRMC, which is kind of an interesting story. So I went to the emergency ward there, and that's where they did a CT scan and found out that I had the blood clots. And I'm fine now. I think I've got rid of the blood clots using blood thinners, but that's another story. Anyway, there's the Good Samaritan part of my call. And if you got a few more minutes, I wanted to talk about veterans.
Well, let me just quiz you a little bit on the Good Samaritan angle first, Mo. Okay. So this Good Samaritan, this jogger, didn't get out his cell phone and photograph or take a video of you kind of writhing on the sidewalk there in pain, and then
No, he did not.
and then post it on social media and say, look at this guy here. He didn't do that, huh?
No, he didn't do that.
I guess then he probably wouldn't get any kind of kudos from the Post.
No. It's not a really good story, I think. It wasn't by the way, I was walking right next to the bus stop on Achotasi and Kamuning, and so there's the bus stop part of the story.
Okay. Yeah, well, it was a good story, Mo. I suspect you don't know the name of the Samaritan, do you?
No, he did not ask for any compensation for being such a good guy. So I think he actually did qualify for. I'm not sure if he was Hebrew or not, but he qualified for helping me. Where what people in the car driving by and looking out the window, I couldn't even move to wave to them. But I thought that was interesting.
Well, I'll tell you what, we don't know who the gentleman was, but given the powers vested in me as the host of Tall Tales with the ability to communicate with an international radio listening audience, I'm going to award the Good Samaritan Award to the person that helped Mo that time when he was in distress.
Okay, we'll try to find out who that person was, because I really needed help. I thought I was dying, but
well, the last time I gave you an assignment to come up with a name, Mo, you did pretty well. So let's try it again, okay?
Yeah, I keep working at it. But another reason I wanted to call, because it just occurred to me that we're always talking about being broke and having expenses, and I keep talking about, why don't you put in a convention center? You probably heard me on the radio at Hospital Point. That was a big deal where we could actually make money using the properties that we have, instead of just talking about how bad things are and how expensive things are. Why don't we try to start making money? And I thought of another way. There's 6.8, I did some research on this, there's 6.8 Vietnam era veterans. And if these people would probably be interested in Guam, they probably would like the marijuana to finally get approved, but that would help. But Hawaii's too expensive now. Everybody knows what's happened to Hawaii. It's just impossible there. We still have relatively decent accommodations here. We could bring in these people. These people don't even need a job. They're not going to take jobs away from anybody. They've got incomes coming, depending on whether they were in combat or not. But even I, who was not in combat, I get a little bit of benefits, like health benefits. They paid for a surgery of mine. And I was surprised when I realized I'd still had Vietnam rights, because that war, I thought the war started in 62, found out later it started in 58, and I was in and out by that time. So anyway, the veterans, and then of course there's the Persian Gulf War veterans, and then there's the World War II veterans.
What do you want to do with them all?
What's that?
What do you want to do with these veterans?
I want to invite them to come and live in Guam and spend their money in Guam, pay their taxes in Guam, and enjoy the benefits of nice warm weather year-round, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of like well, never mind. I get pretty interested in that, since I'm a veteran, and I've been treated pretty well by their standards that they now have. I'm a low-class veteran as far as health because if I needed surgery done in the States, they could get that done, but I still have to pay my way. There are different, but it takes a little bit of work, and maybe I should be in charge of that. Getting veterans that have nice pensions to come to Guam and pay their taxes on Guam. What do you think?
Well, if you'd like, I will work on a writ of appointment and appoint you to that position, Mo.
Well, don't we already have the VA director, and we have 5 or 6 different offices here that are supposed to handle the VA, their rights, and some talk only to casualties or people that are hurt. But it seems to me they got so many people already there. But those people are not like me, where I want to make Guam money somehow before I die. I want to be known for, hey, Guam, Mo's got a lot of good ideas. I'm making money for Guam.
Well, I'll tell you what then, Mo. Again, with the power vested in me as the host of the Tall Tales talk show, commanding the ears of an international radio listening audience, I am hereby creating the Cotton Commission. And it will be the job of the Cotton Commission to persuade veterans who draw large pensions to relocate to Guam. And once again, exercising my executive power, I'm going to appoint you as the executive director of the Cotton Commission.
Could you change it to the Atgadon Commission?
How about maybe the Atgadon Administration? How about that? A little
I like that.
Yeah.
I like it.
Okay, so
would I get a salary?
I'm going to waive.
Volunteer.
I'm going to waive your subscription fees to Tall Tales. You don't have to pay a monthly subscription to Tall Tales.
Can I call in every day then?
I think we can work on that, Mo. Yeah. But right now you got to hang up because it's break time. So.
Okay. Have a good day.
Thank you, Mo.
Bye-bye.
Save big. Save really big when you bundle up your insurance policies with Nanbo Insurance. Insure your home, auto, motorcycle, or business with Nanbo and enjoy great savings, up to 50%. When it comes to insuring your property, no one knows better than the company with over 50 years of service to the community. Don't compromise the things that matter to you most. Call Nanbo today at 477-9754 or visit nanbo.com for more information. Nanbo Insurance, serving you since 1968. Here at APL, our core values give the company its heart and soul. Whether it's connecting your business with our global network through our newly enhanced service or investing our efforts into giving back to the community, APL is committed to serving you. We humbly honor the opportunity to find innovative solutions for you and your business. To learn more about our enhanced service, call 588-4651 or visit www.apl.com/Guam for more details.
Okay, so here we are, back again on Tall Tales. I'm going to go back to some of the more standard fare for Tall Tales, having exercised an extremely large amount of my executive authority here with the last caller, appointing him as the administrator of the Atgadon administration. So we turn from there to the card, and I've got a lot of holdovers from the card from last week. I've got a couple of new items. The first new item is GPA versus Ned Ludd. The second item is Jackie Murati versus the Mayors. And then I've got Howard Hemsing versus Paul Zerzan, Clint versus Zerzan, Rory versus Mike Phillips, Justice Democrats versus Pelosi, and so on from Friday that I didn't really get time to do justice to. But before I plunge into that, you'll recall that after the election and before the inauguration, I had a couple of features that turned out to be extremely interesting. One was the Tall Tales political intel line. You'll recall the critical role that the real Joe Cruz played with the Tall Tales political intel line, decrypting extremely complicated messages, and having decrypted them, informed our international radio listening audience as to who would be appointed to which positions in the incoming Leon Guerrero administration. And I think we were like 99.44% accurate on that, weren't we, real Joe Cruz?
I believe so, sir.
Yeah, and we were way, way ahead of the power curve on that. And in a sort of a similar vein, I dug around in my closet and I find my old crystal ball. And I looked in my crystal ball and I made some predictions, all of which came true. Well, I haven't seen any new traffic on the Tall Tales political intel line, although I know you're monitoring it, aren't you, real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir, I am.
Yeah. But I did gaze into my crystal ball after I saw a story on KUAM on March 8. And it's called, and the title of the story is Governor's Stateside Trip Costs $22,000. The governor's recent trip to the continental U.S. to meet with bondholders and investors came with a $22,000 price tag. Governor Leon Guerrero, First Gentleman Jeff Cook, and Chief of Staff Tony Babauta traveled to San Francisco, New York, and D.C. So this is what I saw when I gazed into that crystal ball after I was my curiosity was piqued by this story. Tony Babauta may very well be employed somewhere in Washington, D.C., instead of as the Chief of Staff for the Leon Guerrero administration. So if there's anything in that, then if my crystal ball reading is correct, then the $22,000 trip, amongst other purposes, also served as a job hunting expedition for Chief of Staff Tony Babauta. So we'll keep an eye on that. See where it goes. Okay, the next item on the list is the GPA versus Ned Ludd. And again, a little historical background. I think I've mentioned this before. I've mentioned Ned Ludd before, haven't I, real Joe Cruz?
I vaguely remember, sir.
Yeah, well, Ned Ludd was a Scotsman. And there was a time in Scotland when a lot of the people there made their living off of weaving wool. And weavers engaged in a very labor-intensive occupation of threading the thread through parts of the loom. Well, some guy came along and invented sort of a mechanical loom that was much more efficient and produced much more high-quality fabric than the old handwork looms. And it put an awful lot of weavers out of business. So one of the weavers was a man named Ned Ludd. And Ned Ludd was kind of like a good modern-day Democrat saying, well, these looms are not good things. They're costing people jobs. So he went around and smashed looms wherever he could in order to protect jobs for weavers. So when you hear the word Ludd, he is a Luddite, that means someone who is opposed to technology as tending to put people out of work. I'm going to put myself out of work while we all enjoy the big halftime show, and I'll be back in about 7 minutes.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Grounding Boeing 737 MAX 8 planes. I'm Ann Carrick, Fox News. It's the second time in less than 6 months a brand new Boeing aircraft failed, prompting the government of China, Ethiopian Airlines, and now Cayman Airways to ground the planes. Fox's Trey Yingst with what happened in Ethiopia.
That Boeing 737 crashed just after takeoff outside of Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, killing all 157 people on board. Officials say that more than 35 different nationalities were represented among those killed. The plane lost contact with air traffic control around 8:44 a.m. local time, just 6 minutes after takeoff. The flight was headed to Nairobi, Kenya. It normally takes around 2 hours to arrive.
Sunday's crash causing a postponement of a public rollout ceremony of Boeing's 400-seat jetliner, the 777X. Malaysian prosecutors withdraw murder charges against the Indonesian suspect in the killing of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's half-brother. Kim Jong-nam initially was the heir apparent, but fell out of favor, likely for advocating reform. He was exiled from North Korea in 2003 and on occasion was critical of the family's regime. The U.S. Department of State calls the death an assassination. Lots of anticipation for the president's new 2020 budget, despite a big ask.
A number of sources close to the budget process tell Fox News that President Trump plans to ask for $8.6 billion to fund his controversial wall at the U.S.-Mexico border.
Fox's Ellison Barber. The request could lead to another government shutdown. The widow of a West Virginia coal miner settles a lawsuit with the federal government for $550,000. 4 investigations found worn and broken equipment created a spark, igniting coal dust and methane gas. Broken and clogged water sprayers turned the minor flare-up into an inferno. 29 men were killed in the 2010 explosion. The mine owned by Massey Energy at the time. This is Fox News.
In 1972, Jesus S. Leon Guerrero pictured a brighter future for our island and its people. With the trust and support of the community, he founded Bank of Guam. In celebration of our 47th anniversary, we're offering a Founders Day loan for up to $50,000, as low as 4.70 annual percentage rate, up to 72 months. Visit any branch or bankofguam.com for more information. Subject to bank's lending criteria, terms and conditions apply. Offer valid until March 29, 2019. Bank of Guam, member FDIC.
Experience the Take Care difference. Take Care members can count on accessing a high-quality, credentialed network of on-island providers, including the convenient one-stop FHP Health Center and Urgent Care, access to an extensive off-island network of providers, and the island's largest offering of free fitness classes and health education programs. You can count on Take Care to deliver comprehensive, accredited insurance coverage and quality health care when and where you need it. Take Care. Our island, your health plan. Learn more at takecareasia.com.
The Intelligence Committee wants to know if President Trump has any business dealings with a negative impact on the United States.
There are a number of probes that have begun since the Democrats assumed control of the House. Intelligence Committee Chair Adam Schiff on NBC's Meet the Press says they're following the president's money, but in a focused investigation.
We're not interested in our committee in whether he's a tax cheat or he's not worth what he says he is or those issues. What we're interested in is, does the president have business dealings with Russia such that it compromises the United States?
The president remains critical of what he sees as Democratic attacks on him. He calls it presidential harassment, saying in a tweet this weekend, the witch hunt continues. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
On the other side of the pond, a big week for Brexit.
Prime Minister Theresa May taking another shot at winning approval from Parliament here for her Brexit divorce proposal, the terms on which the UK would leave the European Union. A vote is expected tomorrow. In January, lawmakers crushed the plan.
Reject it, and no one knows what will happen.
May saying another defeat could prompt a range of outcomes, including no Brexit at all. If she loses, further votes could follow, including one on delaying Brexit beyond its current scheduled date of March 29th. In London, Simon Owen, Fox News.
The mother of a champion boxer is dead after a bizarre incident.
Caleb Plant just won the International Boxing Federation's Super Middleweight Championship in January. That was a time of celebration, but now it's a time of tragedy. An ambulance was called for his mother, 51-year-old Beth Plant of Ashland City, Tennessee, on Saturday. The State Bureau of Investigation says she became combative, and the ambulance crew called police. Investigators say she pulled a knife on a sheriff's deputy who shot her. Plant posting on Facebook, "Love you forever and always, Mama." Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
I'm Ann Carrick, and this is Fox News.
Always here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years, we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Here at APL, our core values give the company its heart and soul. Whether it's connecting your business with our global network through our newly enhanced service or investing our efforts into giving back to the community, APL is committed to serving you. We humbly honor the opportunity to find innovative solutions for you and your business. To learn more about our enhanced service, call 588-4651 or visit www.apl.com/Guam for more details.
With a dynamic, exciting halftime show like ours, Real Joe Cruz, it's no wonder that Tall Tales is the top-rated afternoon FM radio talk show in the Western Pacific. How could we miss?
It's so true, sir.
Yeah.
So very true. Even Rush Limbaugh just warms up for us.
Yeah, you can't blame the guy. Yeah. So a little lecture there on Luddites and Luddism, so that when a technological change comes along, oftentimes work that had been done by people, manual labor perhaps, is done away with, and the Luddites of the world would go around smashing looms to protect those jobs. I think we see that. I was in our new McDonald's in Jigo, and there are ways that you could order your Big Mac without talking to anybody. There's a kiosk. You punch in some numbers and insert your credit card, and as if by magic, you've placed your order. And this sort of technology is coming up in a lot of places in the United States, especially places that think it would be a good idea to have a, quote, living wage for folks that work in fast food restaurants. So we haven't had many incidents of Luddite or Luddism here on Guam, because we've almost never done away with a position because of automation. But I saw a couple of things last year that caused me to take heart that we may actually finally be developing the will to make a smaller government of Guam. One of the things that we saw was that after B.J. Cruz was elected public auditor, one of the first things he had to do was terminate some of his employees because he did not have enough of a budget to keep them on the payroll. And B.J. said something along the lines of, I can't be talking about fiscal austerity and then on my first day in office ask the legislature for more money. And one of the people that he had to let go was probably his best hitter. But he had to do it. The other example was the Power Authority, who did away with some meter reader positions and got some press out of that. What I'm going to talk about here in a minute is a case that went before the Civil Service Commission dealing with one of the meter readers who lost his job. A gentleman named Frank Camacho. Commissioners decided on Thursday that GPA made every effort to provide former employee Frank Camacho a job with the same pay. Camacho, a customer service electrician supervisor with 28 years of service at the utility, was one of the employees to be laid off because GPA had abolished its meter reader and customer service electrician positions after the implementation of the smart grid system. GPA contended that there were no positions to which the affected employee could be moved, and so on. He was represented by Robert Koss of the teachers union, and notwithstanding Koss' efforts, and Koss was somewhat critical of the decision, but the decision stood. And I would see that, I have to be careful how I say that, I would see the fact that the Civil Service Commission upheld the Power Authority as good news. Not good news for Frank Camacho, and it's always a cause for a certain amount of sadness when a man loses his job, especially somebody who had 28 years of service. This is not a time to act like Democrats who just passed an abortion bill and stand up and cheer. But it does stand for the proposition that there are elements of our government that will automate, and when a job is no longer necessary, that job will be eliminated. So I'd have to see that as a good sign. And it's probably something that we're going to be dealing with more in the future as more automation comes along and the necessity for hand labor diminishes as time goes on. And I got a post here from Nate Horn, who says that's why Japan is full of vending machines, too expensive to pay workers for cheap jobs. So, you know, the hard facts are that in businesses are in business to make money. And the only time that you pay someone to do a job is if paying that person to do a job will add value to your company. In other words, if it costs you $10 an hour to hire somebody, that person has to be able to bring in more than $10 worth of revenue in order to keep that person on the job. And the cost of machines like the SmartNet, et cetera, a lot less than hiring a worker. So that's the situation here with this case. That's why it's called GPA versus Ned Ludd. There's something really troubling in this report, though, and it keeps popping up. And it's actually the first sentence of the story. The Civil Service Commission has decided in favor of the Power Authority despite a recommendation by staff to find a utility in violation of some of its own rules regarding layoffs. Well, I don't know anybody named Staff. I've never met anybody named Staff. I know the names of all of the commissioners on the Civil Service Commission. I know who they are, and if they make a decision, I know who made the decision. But to me, it's frightening to think that somebody named Staff is making recommendations and that the Civil Service Commission listens to the recommendations. Adverse action appeals and grievance appeals before the Civil Service Commission are what we would call adversary appeals. That is, in this particular case, you had the employee on one side, you had the Guam Power Authority on the other side, just like in a court case. And the design of our system is that if you have two interested parties who advance the best arguments that they can to a fair and impartial tribunal, more often than not, you're going to come up with the right result. But if you've got somebody called Staff who ex officiously whispers in the ear of the commissioners, it really derails the whole process. We don't know who they are. We don't know what basis they're making their advice on. It puts it puts the parties at a tremendous disadvantage, because if it's Power Authority versus Frank Camacho, then whatever Frank Camacho says, the Power Authority can rebut, and vice versa. But when staff comes along and says, hey, look over here, I'm staff, and here's my recommendation. I'm not going to tell you how I made that recommendation. I'm not even going to tell you what my name is. So I've never been a real fan of the Civil Service Commission, and this is part of the reason. Now, when the Civil Service Commission handles what we call mini Hatch Act appeals, it's a little different, because those are not adversary cases. In those situations, the commission is in an inquisitorial role, and I suppose having the staff go out and investigate is a necessary evil. But anytime you have two parties versus one another, the staff should be locked up in a room in another building and not be heard to comment on what's going on before the commission. So, GPA versus Ned Ludd. Next on my card here is Jackie Marotti versus the mayors. And this goes, this is from the Post story called Fierce Protest, Strong Support on Gambling. And I covered this a little bit before, but here's what's involved. A bill, 34, as you were, 29-35, creates, it would allow the mayor's council to enact some rules and regulations. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but I have one of my favorites here. I play favorites once in a while. I've got Helen Middlebrook on the line, and I'm going to take Helen Middlebrook's call. Good afternoon, Helen.
Hey, hi, Bob. How are you?
Better than I deserve, Ellen, but hanging in there.
Well, I was calling in. We had talked the other day when I saw you about a movie that's coming out at the end of this month, and we were going to talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
We have a movie coming out. It's called Unplanned, and it's the story of Abby Johnson, who was the youngest clinic director in the history of Planned Parenthood. She ran a clinic in Texas, and she really thought she was helping young ladies in a crisis situation until the day she walked into a procedure and saw what was really happening. And then she realized that abortion was not what she thought it was, and babies were being killed on her watch, and she left. But, of course, she didn't leave Planned Parenthood without difficulty. So this is her story. She wrote a book about it called Unplanned, and then they've made a movie out of it. So it's a pro-life movie, and it's coming out on the 29th, but we have a special show scheduled for the 28th to raise money for the Safe Haven Pregnancy Center.
Okay, well, that's a lot. Let me kind of go through here point by point, okay, Helen?
Okay.
So the name of the movie is Unplanned.
Yes.
All right, so one needs to be a little bit careful when he discusses it and avoid the tendency to say, hey, did you see the unplanned movie?
Oh, yeah, true.
Because apparently everything about this initiative has been planned. It's just that the title is Unplanned. And what is the explanation for that? Does the title come from the fact that the Planned Parenthood planner decided that this wasn't a good plan after all?
I would think so. I think that's probably the pun intended in there.
Okay.
I think she really didn't. I don't think she really planned to see what she saw. It really shook her up when the day that she went in to help with the procedure, and she watched on an ultrasound what was happening.
Okay. So when you say procedure, what you're talking about is an abortion, right, Helen?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So what was her name again?
Abby Johnson.
So when Abby Johnson actually saw and abortion instead of reading about it in Planned Parenthood propaganda. She changed her mind and decided maybe this Planned Parenthood is not really for me. Is that correct?
Correct. So she's now become a very vocal pro-life advocate.
And I suspect that this does not exactly strike joy in the hearts of the Planned Parenthood types.
I don't think so. I'm actually expecting that this movie will be like Gosnell and will get blacklisted in the States.
Yeah. I was surprised that the theaters here ran Gosnell, because the fact that it's really good box office didn't make much difference in the States when it came to good box office versus political correctness. Political correctness seemed to triumph in the States.
Well, we actually got it. I requested that movie when it started getting blacklisted in the States.
Oh.
So I made the request to our local theater to see if they could get it, and they got it, which was kind of a surprise. So we had very short time to actually let people know that we were actually going to get the movie.
Well, good for you, Helen. You know, I think it was an English parliamentarian who said that the only necessity for evil to triumph is that good men do nothing. And you did something, and it had a pretty good effect, right?
Well, I hope it did. We didn't have a real great turnout, but because of the late support of the Catholic Pro-Life Committee, we did get to keep that movie longer than expected.
Okay, so the movie will show on the 20...
It will open on the 29th for a 2-week stint here on Guam.
Yeah.
But on the 28th, we're having a special fundraiser to raise money for the Safe Haven Pregnancy Center.
Okay, so where can I buy my dozen tickets for the showing on the 28th?
Right down at Faith Bookstore.
Okay.
We've actually sold enough right now that we need to move into a larger theater, so we need to print more tickets.
Good.
But right now, Faith Bookstore does have some, and I have a few, and we'll be getting more.
Okay, well, old-timers like us know that in order to tell someone where something is, you have to tell that person where what used to be in the place where... So I know where Faith Bookstore used to be, but I don't know where it is now.
It's down on the corner of Route 8 and Route 1. So when Route 8 merges with Marine Corps Drive, it's in that building that's across the street from the venue, I think is the name of it.
Okay.
That's right there at the intersection.
Yeah, it's not where American Cafe used to be. It's up Road 8 a little bit in the building that used to be called the new Koa Mart, right?
Yes, that's correct. It's in that space.
Okay, well, I'm glad I found somebody else who knows locations here on Guam. Okay, Helen, well, I hope you'll keep us posted here. I hope you'll call us from time to time and tell us how the ticket sales are going, and remind our international radio listening audience that this really important movie is coming up. I can tell you I'll be certain to see it, and we'll probably spend a few minutes reviewing it, but that's not going to be a substitute for actually going to the movie.
Great. Well, thanks for the time to talk about it. I really appreciate it.
Okay, Helen, nice talking to you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Well, that call was unplanned. But it was a good call, right? So sometimes the things that are unplanned exceed your plans. So as I mentioned to Helen in the conversation there, I plan to talk more about unplanned as time marches on. Okay, so going back to the card, we had Jackie Moratti versus the Mayor's Council. And this deals with a public hearing that was held on Bill 29-35, which, you know, I thought Dennis Rodriguez would get the prize for screwy legislation, but I think Dennis has got some competition here. This is Jim Moylan, who, if his bill passes, will empower the mayors to draft legislation to allow for gambling, games of chance, to support the Liberation Day Carnival. And one of the things that the delegation of legislative authority to an administrative body in order to draft rules and regulations, one of the things that's required is that there must be standards involved. Otherwise, what it amounts to is the legislature saying, I don't feel like passing laws, Mayor's Council of Guam, why don't you guys go ahead and do it? And I think that's what we're dealing with here. Whether, you know, without getting to the question of whether or not gambling is a good thing or gambling is a bad thing, legislation is a good thing when it's done by the legislature. It's not such a good thing when it's farmed out to somebody else. And I can't think of a more inept place or group to farm out this task than to the Mayor's Council. Now, we spent a lot of time on Tall Tales talking about the things that the Mayor's Council doesn't want to do. They don't want to cut grass at the schools. Don't talk to the Mayor's Council. Don't talk to the mayors about litter, because it's just not important enough for them to get involved with. So, once again, my idea of what the mayors are for, and I suppose there are others who have similar views, but we have a unitary form of government here. We don't have counties. We don't even have towns. We have what we call municipalities and villages. But they are, that's just a name we've assigned to them. They are not municipalities in the same sense as Oceanside, California is a municipality. Oceanside, California, and other municipalities in the various states are incorporated, and they're chartered by the state government, and the state government establishes the framework for the government of that municipality, determines what powers and disabilities that city has, and oftentimes gives that city the ability to tax. Here we call, for instance, Tatuhan or Tatuhan or whatever it is, Tumum Harmon, we call it a village, but it's not. It's marks on a piece of paper, and there is an official that used to be called a commissioner, now called a mayor, that is supposed to have some responsibility and some power for that village. If a mayor is useful at all, it would seem to me that the mayor's enterprises and activities have to be directed strictly to things within, here I'm going to get stuck again. If it were Tamuning, I would say her village, because it's Luis Rivera. And if I were going to talk about Mong Mong Toto Mighty, I would say it's his village, because the commissioner is Mr. Paco. But I can't do that, can I, Real Joe Cruz? What pronoun must I use?
There, sir.
There. So a mayor should pay attention to their village. That's what they're for. So the mayor of Humatak ought to spend 99% of his time on trying to improve conditions in Humatak. And the mayor of Jigo the same way. I don't expect, and I think it's a real mistake to have this mayor's council created. This is I think it's 34 GCA, as you were 5 GCA, section 4015. There is established a mayor's council comprised of all mayors and vice mayors. The officers of the council shall consist of a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and sergeant at arms. Elections shall be held every 2 years. The council shall adopt its own rules and bylaws, provided that the rules and bylaws do not impede, restrict, or in any way limit the authority of each mayor within his district. Such rules and bylaws may be amended, etc. A quorum of the council shall consist of not less than 60%. So there's this quasi-parliamentary body called the Mayor's Council has been established. And the Mayor's Council has a budget, and it can hire staff, and it can hire an executive director, And obviously, some people think that it can conduct a carnival. Well, I don't want my mayor, I don't want the mayor of Jigo even thinking about conducting a carnival. I want him to concentrate all his efforts on the village of Jigo. And in this case, it's a pretty big order. And I would expect the mayor of my village to be interacting with the departments of Public Works, Parks and Recreation, etc., to make sure that the people in my village are properly served. I expect the mayor of my village to be interested in stray dogs, litter, graffiti, and the 7th inning stretch. So we'll be right back after the 7th inning stretch.
Do you know someone who has difficulty following conversation in noisy places or turns up the TV a little too loud? These may be signs of a hearing loss. Ross Hearing Aids specializes in hearing evaluations, custom-fit hearing aids using the latest in wireless digital technology, and custom-fit hearing protectors. Call Ross Hearing Aids today to schedule a complimentary hearing consultation. 637-HEAR, 637-HEAR. Ross Hearing Aids, located across Shirley's in Harmon. The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
We all know how important it is for managers to give praise to workers. But did you know how important it is to learn how to accept praise? I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we'll talk about praise, the giving, and the accepting.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
It sounded just like that ball that Jack Haddock hit when he used to play in this league before he got drafted by the Chamorro Land Trust Commission.
Tall Tales Tigers, right?
The Tall Tales Tigers. What a team. Yeah. So going back to the mayors, you know, I have high expectations of the mayors. I expect them to devote all of their time and attention to the village, which they are elected to serve, not to be sitting on a quasi-parliamentary body that has a president and a secretary and a treasurer, et cetera, and an executive director. I think this is a needless frill and a creator of mischief, this whole gambling thing being a classic example where a senator would delegate legislative power to an outfit that, in my estimation, has no real purpose. There shouldn't be anything that stands between the mayor of a village and the people in his village. He shouldn't have to horse around with some kind of a council or commission or whatever. So I think it's time that we took a hard look at the entire office of the mayor, what it is that they do, what our expectations of them are. And one of the callers the other day pointed out that the mayor of Jigo, which is the largest village, and the mayor of Humatak, which on a population basis is the smallest, get paid the same amount of money. So this whole mayor system is not something that someone sat down and carefully thought out. It's just something that it kind of grew, and it reaches really silly results. Even if I were 1,000% in favor of gambling and to support the carnival, I would not want the mayor's council to touch it with somebody else's 10-foot pole. That's not what mayors are about. So the testimony, as the story points out, was pretty heated. You had Jackie Murati coming out who testified 100% against it. Deputy Mayor Melissa Savaras, president of the Mayor's Council. Now, when we're talking about Melissa Savaris, would we refer to them as Mayor Savaris or President Savaris? And when Mayor Savaris walks into the room, should we play Hail to the Chief? Anyhow, Daddy-Do Mayor Melissa Savaris, president of the Mayor's Council, said the mayors support Moylan's bill, but noted that rules and regulations should be completed in collaboration with other agencies. Well, we probably have as poor a record on rules and regulations as any jurisdiction I've ever run across. We don't do it right. We don't know how to do it. In the case of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, that stands for the proposition we don't even know what a rule or regulation is. There is a statute, Public Law 23-38, that is called the Paul Berdalia Rules and Regulations, but it's not. It's just another statute. And because of that, it's not listed in the Guam rules portion of the compiler's website. It's a black hole. So I can't think of any redeeming feature that this bill has. And I'm saying that even if I were 100%, 1,000% in favor of gambling, this is not even close to the way to go about doing it. Second, I'm not 1,000% in favor of gambling. I don't know that if I'm even in favor of the carnival. Now, back in the day, I used to take the grandchildren to the carnival. But, you know, once kids have been to Disneyland, it's pretty hard to get them excited about the carnival. And if we have to have gambling in order to support the carnival, then that, to me, would be a pretty easy matter to resolve. Let's just not have the carnival. We do a great job with the parade. I think our Liberation Day parade is the kind of celebration, in my mind, it's right up there with Oktoberfest in Munich or Mardi Gras in New Orleans or Carnival in Rio de Janeiro. I go and I really enjoy myself because the parade is kind of like a 2-mile-long fiesta. It's a place to meet your friends and talk to folks, and it's very enjoyable. It's a lot of fun. I've marched in the parade a few times. I got a kick out of that, and it is a suitable way to remember the 1,548 Marines that got killed on Guam after the 21st of July to take this island back from the Japanese. And that, of course, is the purpose of liberation. The purpose of the Liberation Day celebration is not to provide some kind of rationale for the mayors to farm out gambling, again, to some faceless people, make a lot of money, which no one seems to have any accounting for, and perhaps waste it on things that none of us approve of. I'll give you a good example. We all remember the Strawberry Festival, right? What a boondoggle. And in my village, the ink was hardly dry on the mayor's certificate of election before last, before he took off on a junket to someplace in the Philippines. He not only took off on a junket, he arranged for the Bayanean magazine and the Daily News to brag about it. You know, all his pictures there, everything like that. And he burned up a lot of travel money per diem. Of course, he drew his salary. And it wasn't enough for him to go and attend this. He had to be, here's the word again, he had to be staffed, which meant that a staff member of the Mayor's Council, there so happened the executive director of the Mayor's Council, went along with the mayor as, I suppose, his body man, doorman, manservant, maidservant, valet, I don't know. But what a waste of money. And it did absolutely nothing for our village. So I am not a fan of the way the system works right now. I suspect that there are mayors in our system that do pretty good work for their villages in spite of the design of the system. So I think that Jim Moylan, if he wants to introduce bills dealing with the mayors, would be well advised to take a long, hard look at it and reform this whole outfit or do away with it. Certainly don't give the mayors the authority to do something that's, one, a dumb idea, and two, they're not equipped to handle. Okay, next item on the card. Where is the card here? I know I got one here somewhere. Oh, yeah. It's Howard Hemsing versus Paul Zerzan. Before I get to that, I ran across an article that I didn't put into the card. I'll just mention it briefly. In the card, this would be the United States versus Chelsea Manning, formerly known as Bradley Manning. And you might recall Chelsea Manning back during the time that Chelsea Manning was Bradley Manning. And this is one of those cases, I guess, where they is appropriate. They were specialists in the Army who had access to a lot of sensitive intelligence information, which they siphoned off and gave to WikiLeaks. And Manning was sentenced to 35 years in prison on a variety of charges, was pardoned after, I think it was 5 or 6 years by President Obama. No surprise there. And went from being Chelsea, as you were Bradley Manning, to being Chelsea Manning. And the latest that Chelsea made the news was that she's now in jail again for contempt of court because she was given a subpoena to appear before a federal grand jury, and she refused to testify, saying, in solidarity with many activists facing the odds, I will stand by my principles. I will exhaust every legal remedy available. So the judge gave her a choice, either testify to the grand jury or go to jail. So she's in jail right now. Lawyers explain civil contempt this way. If a person is confined to jail cell on a civil contempt matter, that person has the keys to the jail cell in his pocket. All that person has to do is comply with the court's order, and they are out of jail. So I think this is kind of ironic that that Manning, who seemed to be so open to sharing information with everybody all over the world, even though the information she shared was quite sensitive, doesn't want to talk to the grand jury, where everything that she says will be secret. I don't know. It's another one of those, Real Joe Cruz, another one where when the dog bites a man, it's not news. When a man bites a dog, it's news. Okay, so we go from there to Howard Hemsing versus Paul Zerzan. And Paul Zerzan was a person who testified in opposition to Bill 32-35, which is Clint Rigel's bill that would legalize recreational marijuana. And I'm not going to go into the merits of the idea of the bill. I've spent some time on that yesterday. No need to go through it again. I'm only going to comment on what is apparently acceptable at a public hearing and what is not acceptable at a public hearing. Let's start out with Zerzan. Sparks ignited early on when Paul Zerzan got into a disagreement with Rigel on statistics produced by studies of the impact of cannabis performed in the state of Colorado. Zerzan's impassioned testimony came to a boiling point as he was weeded out of the public hearing for repeatedly shouting at the senator who was attempting to respond to him. As Zerzan was escorted out, he accused the senator of being high, telling the senator, "You are a liar and you are high on drugs. Look at your red eyes." Rigel kept his composure, however. He asked that Zerzan be removed for his inability to hold a civil disposition. Perhaps Zerzan is under the influence of something that is causing him to act out. So one of the things apparently that's acceptable at public hearings is the exchange of remarks that, were it not for the speech and debate clause, are arguably in the defamatory category. Perhaps a senator can make his point without ascribing being under the influence of drugs to someone at a public hearing whose behavior is not appropriate. Howard Hemsing, we always go on to Howard Hemsing, also known as Marganiti Roberto, stunned those present at this afternoon's public hearing when he produced 3 bags of cannabis, waved them in the air while saying, "Guajaquini $50 bag, Guajaquini $100 bag, Hadzi Malago." So currently under Guam law, the possession of cannabis under the amount of 28 grams or 1 ounce is legal and considered only a violation similar to a traffic ticket. So to say that it's legal, kind of a stretch. If it's a violation, it's not legal. I think the story would have made more sense, not against a criminal law. Despite, and then going on, despite the resinous situation on the floor, there were highlights and clarity of mind that brought logic and reason to both sides of the dialectic. And then that goes on into somebody else's testimony. KUAM covered the same hearing, and local teacher Paul Zerzan testified in firm opposition of cannabis legalization. "It does not make you smart. It makes people stupid. That's why they call it dope." Zerzan said marijuana has no medicinal value other than, like medicinal whiskey, it makes you feel good. It makes you feel good by poisoning your brain. Zerzan eventually became irate at the hearing and had to be bounced out. Quote, "He accused me of being stoned during the middle of the hearing, which was actually 100% false, and then he just kept calling me a liar." Senator Rigel said, "I kept asking him to be civil. He wouldn't listen, so I asked that he be removed." So in one of the other coverages, Rigel explains that he was trying to explain to Zerzan his own particular position. But I think the overall evaluation here is this, that if you take a position that is contrary to the chairman of the committee and the author of a bill, you want to be very careful, or you might be kicked out of legislative hearing. I've seen some pretty bad behavior at legislative hearings. I've never seen anyone kicked out of the hearing before, but Paul Zerzan managed to do it somehow. A second thing that we could take away from that is that it's okay to at least portray illegal activity in a legislative hearing. It's okay to say, I've got a $100 bag of marijuana and I've got a $50 bag of marijuana and I want to sell it. Who wants to buy? This would apparently be acceptable conduct, especially when the chairman says, well, it doesn't appear that he had more than an ounce. So we get into some fine criminal law points here, but we allow this kind of a display to go on at a public hearing. So if you portray an act that seems to favor the position of the sponsor of the bill, even though the act that you're portraying may very well be illegal, it's okay, no problem. I would like to see a little bit better standard of at public hearings than what was witnessed here at this one. I don't want to see people coming into public hearings and mocking them by saying, I got a $50 bag and a $100 bag. Who wants it? Who wants to buy? Interestingly enough, that display might have been perhaps the poorest way to advocate the passage of that bill, causing the more cynical amongst the audience to say, is that what happens when a person uses that particular product? Okay, so much for that item on the card. We're finished with the card. I forgot about the Scamby test today. So right after or down the home stretch, we're going to have the Scamby test. And then I'm going to go into the two features if I still have time.
Lent-friendly burgers at Chili's. Indulge in a selection of our famous burgers with a black bean patty. Black bean patties combine beans with onions, parsley, bell peppers, and cilantro. Served with dill pickles and fries. More Lenten entrees include the spicy shrimp tacos, Cajun pasta with shrimp, or grilled ancho salmon. Best of all, each entree is just $15 and comes with a refreshing Coca-Cola, iced tea, or Heineken on draft. Our fresh house salad with an entree for just $15. Chili's 3 for Me Lent menu. Available for a limited time. Chili's. More life happens here.
Save big. Save really big when you bundle up your insurance policies with Nanbo Insurance. Insure your home, auto, motorcycle, or business with Nanbo and enjoy great savings, up to 50%. When it comes to insuring your property, no one knows better than the company with over 50 years of service to the community. Don't compromise the things that matter to you most. Call Nanbo today at 477-9754 or visit nanbo.com for more information. Nanbo Insurance, serving you since 1968.
So it's the home stretch of Tall Tales. That means I've got less than 8 minutes to plumb the depths of the intelligence of the real Joe Cruz. I don't think it can be done, but I'll give it a shot. Now, you'll recall that I've asked the real Joe some really tough questions, and he's always come up with a pretty good answer. As an example, yesterday I said, Real Joe Cruz, what is the main reason for divorce? And the real Joe Cruz said, marriage. He nailed that one.
I think it's true.
Yep. So I got a couple more questions here for you, Real Joe Cruz. First, what looks like half an apple?
The other half?
You got it. Real Joe Cruz, if you throw a red stone into the blue sea, what will it become?
I think it will become a wet stone on the sea bottom.
Okay. All right. Real Joe Cruz, how can a man go 8 days without sleeping?
That's no problem, sir. He can sleep at night.
All right. Just one more, and that's enough. I've just about had enough of this stuff here. Real Joe Cruz, how can you lift an elephant with one hand?
That's simple, sir. You'll never find an elephant that has only one hand.
Yeah, the Real Joe Cruz has got a mind like a steel trap.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Well, thank you, Real Joe Cruz. You're a true scholar indeed. I've got a couple of features here. One of them is our planet is not fragile. It's called Our Planet is Not Fragile, and I've listed several naturally occurring phenomena that were extremely powerful that weren't caused by men. And I do this to suggest that puny mankind, or person kind, or them, with all of their carbon, all the burning fossil fuels, etc., are not going to be able to have much of effect on the climate of the planet. So I'm going to go through this list, and then after I've done that, I've got another article here called amidst global warming hysteria, NASA expects global cooling. So I'll pick that up next. So yesterday, or excuse me, on Friday, I talked about the 1815 Tambora eruption in Indonesia that spewed so much debris into the atmosphere that 1816 became known as the year without a summer. It led to crop failures and livestock death in the northern hemisphere, producing the worst famine of the 19th century. In other words, a volcanic eruption caused all of that. Now here's the next item. The AD 535 Krakatoa eruption had such force that it blotted out much of the light and heat of the sun for 18 months and is said to have led to the Dark Ages. Geophysicists estimate that just three volcanic eruptions, Indonesia 1883, Alaska 1912, and Iceland 1947, spewed more carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere than all of mankind's activities during our entire history. So the reason I'm doing this is I think it really gives the lie to the Al Gore Democrat ultra-left idea that the world is coming to an end and that unless we all quit eating meat and start driving Priuses, the world as we know it will end. And in order to take the necessary measures, in order to save the world, we've got to embark on ridiculous undertakings like AOC's New Green Deal. Green New Deal? New Deal Green? Whatever. So, no more airplanes, no more meat, etc. And if we were able to do all of those things, the only way that it could be done would be to have extremely large, powerful governments to make people do things that, first of all, don't make any sense, and second of all, would be grossly against their self-interest. Now, in order to do all of these things, who is willing to cut his own standard of living by about 90%? We could stop burning fossil fuels here on Guam right now. We just get a hold of the CCU and tell them, turn off all the generators and have the cops go out and arrest anybody who starts a generator. Of course, the cops would have to be riding horses when they did this because cars, are also culprits. So if we had a powerful enough government with enough authority and enough people, we could stop this dangerous trend right here on our island. Now, I don't know that much about animals, about horticulture. I don't know what the flatulence ratio is between horses and cows, but even horses might not be a good substitute for the automobile if horses are as flatulent as cows. But this is the path that the left wants you to follow. They want to scare the heck out of you because, burning fossil fuels is going to bring about the end of the world. It's changing the climate. And unless we have a strong government and do all these things, it's going to be really, really bad. So I'm going to continue next tomorrow with more on our planet is not fragile. In the process, I'm probably going to have to continue bashing the left. But it's got to be done. I guess I can handle the mission. So see you all tomorrow. Adios.